Coming to you live from Radio Cayman Studio.
For the record.
For the record. Hear from your government officials, independents, and the opposition on issues that matter to you. The record. Engage in an open dialogue between residents and lawmakers.
For the record.
The record. Informative, impartial, insightful.
This is your talk show.
1-800-534-8255. Your calls, your input. This is For the Record. And now, your host, Orit Connor.
Good morning and welcome to For the Record. Today being Monday, the 29th day of May 2017. I trust that everyone had an enjoyable weekend. For some, it may have been a tension-filled weekend. For some, it may have been a weekend of intrigue and anticipation. For some, it was nail-biting. I know people who didn't go to work because they were so upset about news that they were getting all sorts of things happening on the weekend. So I trust that you are now relieved. We may not be any closer to answers, but I trust we are now relieved. I want to thank you, our listening and viewing audience, for allowing Radio Cayman and by extension For the Record into your homes, into your vehicles as you traverse the busy roads of the Cayman Islands, into your places of work, whether it be an office cubicle or if you're working in the outdoors. For the Record is a show produced by the staff and the management of Radio Cayman, and it is geared towards keeping you abreast of issues as they arise and play out on the local, regional, and international scene. I am your host, Orit Connor, and you're welcome to join me every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday from 7:30 a.m. until 9:30 a.m. Our phone lines are always open. There is always someone there waiting to take your calls. Normally, it's that beautiful radio voice of Miss Susan Watson, and she will continue to do that unless she is chosen as Speaker of the Legislative Assembly. You can call us on our toll-free number provided courtesy of Flo. That toll-free number is 1-800-534-8255. You can also call us on 949-8037 and 949-6990. Of course, if you don't like to talk on the telephone, you can email us at For the Record. That is one word, For the Record, at CANDW.KY. As usual, it is my pleasure to have in the studio with me this morning, jet-lagged Miss Teresa Pitcairn and Dr. Steve McField. Folks, good morning. Welcome to For the Record. Tell me about your experiences this weekend. Let's start with Miss Teresa.
As you say, I'm a touch jet lag, but I recall on Saturday I was in the middle of a congress in Guyana, and my phone was literally on fire. Someone jabbed me in my side, says, "Miss T, what is going on?" I said, "Boy, Cayman is just as beautiful and authentic as ever." But as I got up this morning, as I was saying to you, OC, one of the thoughts that came to mind was what a professor said to me about politics in the Caribbean, in that it's, in as much as it's affected by the vagaries of the global economies and also whether or not we have any resources, but a large part is due to the politics of power, our politicians. And I thought about what happened in Trinidad, for example, in 2010. You had a vacillation between the People's National Movement, and they were out and ousted because of corruption. Then you had a coalition in 2010, and you had a record number of 11 ministers being fired again in 2015. The same thing in Guyana in 2015. Guyana has had a history of having a very, very long government. I think Burnham was in for 23 years. So it wasn't even so much the difference in ideology between Chedi Jagan and Burnham, because they were all kind of like leftist. But again, the vacillation between one group to the next, not over change in ideas, but over change in power. People get up every morning and the politicians go and they make all of these promises. The day after they're elected, you see a complete change. The same people who got on the bandwagon and the stage and promised you the world, you saw who they really were the day after election, and we're seeing it right here again with all the iterations of groupings. Caymanians said they don't want PPM leadership. They said they don't want CDP leadership. What is so unclear about that? I honestly, what is so unclear about a resonating sound for change? I don't get it. I don't know, Steve, how you feel. People call you up before the election and after the election. There's this silence.
Dr. Steve, your experience on the weekend.
I want to say thank you for asking me to come back again, and I want to say a good morning to you, all your listeners in Cayman and abroad. I know you have lots of people listening abroad. Well, what is the difference is that we see now the lack of education, political education in the country, in the schools, and in the homes. And here is a typical example of lack of political education. And what has happened now is that Section 49 of the Constitution now comes into force and is glaring that the Westminster system of government is the best system of government that we have had so far, in that the Westminster system of parliamentary democracy is a party system. And that has ensued all over the Commonwealth. In Canada, New Zealand, Australia, Jamaica, Bahamas, everywhere. And notwithstanding that people talk about the violence in Jamaica, the political violence in Jamaica, put that aside, because violence only comes through the people who operate the parties and not the parties themselves. Because even in Cayman Islands, the parties here have constitutions, their rules and regulations and their bylaws that you have to abide by. But some people do not abide by the rules and regulations of the party. And if you did abide by the rules and regulations of the party, it would not throw you off. Mm-hmm. So even in Jamaica, after an election, you know who is going to govern the country. That is a knowledge that everybody knows the next morning after the election who is going to govern the country. In our country, where you have so many independents, as I have said before, an independent system of government is not a Westminster system of government, because you don't know who is going to run the country. And this whole weekend has been an example of that. Ups and downs, this coalition, this group come in, this group got together. One guy is premier for a day, and then next day he's not premier. It's obvious that the party system is the best party system, because it always tells you at the end of the election which one has the majority, and that one has the majority under our Constitution, and under the British parliamentary system of democracy, we know that they are going to form the government.
Mm-hmm. Are we fortunate that this all played out over the weekend when most businesses were closed, most international transacted business basically came to a halt? But do we want to continue this uncertainty? I started to think about it, and I said, we're talk about having a politically stable environment, stable governments and everything, but we're not showing it in this instance. And I thought, we sound like we're a banana republic. And then I said, no, we're not a banana republic acting like a banana republic. We're acting like a bottler republic. Yes. Not even banana bottler. Yes, and for those of you who know what a bottler is, it's not as good as the banana or the plantain, a bottler republic that we were really operating on. The other question is social media, how much it played in these negotiations, as well as the number of novices that we see, or it appears to have been involved in these negotiations, where things were leaked out either deliberately or not? Well,
that's the point, you see, OC. There should not have been any negotiations.
Right.
And there should have not been social media involved in the electoral system. That is the danger that we are the road that we're going down.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Because if you had the party system and the parties had won, even if the independents had gotten together and formed a party, a coalition, or whatever they call it, So we know what their policy was. We know what their mandate would have been. We know that the country would have given them a mandate to carry out those policies and that vision. You would not need social media to get between them to say this is who you should join up with and this is who you shouldn't join up with. That's the danger that we're posed with now.
But even if we had two parties and they were stable, and even if the people gave them a mandate, there is no guarantee that either of those parties would actually carry out that mandate. And that is why we ended up with the craziness that we have now. They get in, this particular party criticize party A, and then the other one criticize party B. They get into power and the same exact behavior of irreverence and disrespect for the people who put them in. That is the crux. There is no trust. The people can't trust who these people say that the kind of policies that these people say that they're going. Yeah.
Okay, we have one caller. Let's go to the phone lines. Caller, good morning. Welcome to For the Record.
Good morning to you, sir. This is Miss Daphne Allred.
Good morning, ma'am, and congratulations on your performance during the elections.
Yes, it was quite an interesting ride, and I will say this since you just mentioned that, and that is that the several weeks that we were involved in the campaign, I must say to you that I got my message out. I knew that was where I should have been at that time, and I was able to get my message out about the urgent matters that I thought we needed to address, and so I was really, really grateful for that. Speaking of course, and let me say at this point, I was welcomed into the home of the West Bay constituents, certain of the West Bay West constituents. They were warm, they were kind, they were very receptive toward my visit to them, and I am telling you, obviously, the votes show that I was not the one that they decided they wanted at this point in time, but for whatever reason, I know that everywhere I went, they were warm and very receptive toward my message that I was giving them. The other thing is, speaking of party system, as you know, what it's often said, a rose by any other name is still a rose. You can look at it and call it a tulip, an orchid, a hibiscus. It is still a rose. Now, this idea about independence running a country, we have independence, but you have two who are together over here, another two who are together over there, and the others are almost like scattered. Then you have another group, which is certainly, from all accounts, supported by one individual. So they form another group. Now, if you get into the House of Assembly and you had all of these independents in there who claim they're independent, when you're independent, you're one person. You carry out whatever whatever those intentions or interests might be. So if you have a government where you have all of these different people trying to run a government and they're not cohesive, they're not together, you can see the mess. What I'd like to say here is a team. You may call it a team. You may call it a grouping. You may call it whatever you wish. It's just a grouping without a name. So if you wanted to call it the Independent Party, it is still a party. So this idea that I'm not joining any party, I'm going independent, yes. And who else are you going to work with in the House? Or are you going to think along one line, he the other? Have you ever heard or known of any entity, whether that's a football team, whether that's a church, whether it there's certain things that you have a common goal, you have rules, regulations, you're not factioned all over. Because a house divided against itself is going to fall. It cannot stand. So that's why the party system, as Dr. Steve, you so well alluded to, the Westminster system is a good system. It may not be a perfect system, but nobody else has shown me that there is a perfect system. So I think Caymanian people need to be educated, and that education had better start early in the schools. Let these people know that this thing about independence cannot work. You will have a house full of confusion, and when it comes to the government, this is not some doll's house game. It is serious. It is running this country for 4 years. That's why when we get in there, we need to understand you cast your vote for individuals that you believe can do the job, do it well, and not just because someone has thrown their hat in the ring, as it were. So I'd just like to leave you with one thought.
Very quickly,
A
Colin.
rose by any other name is still a rose. Thank you.
Thank you very much, caller. Folks, I want to remind you that you're listening to For the Record. I'm your host, Art Connor. My guest in the studio with me this morning, Ms. Teresa Pitcairn and Dr. Steve Macfield. Please stay tuned. For the Record, we'll be back shortly. Good morning. Welcome back to For the Record. We're discussing in the studio this morning with Dr. Steve Macfield and Ms. Teresa Pitcairn our current elections, the results of those elections, and what has transpired since then in terms of the formation of a government and going down to our legislative assembly. Dr. Steve, coming to you.
Yes, there's this problem. I understand that in the media that that Mr. McLaughlin is going to contact the governor this week, today or something. I think it says today on Monday. Now I don't know what he is going to contact the governor for, unless he's going to contact the governor to convene the legislative assembly, because he could not. If they have an agreement, if the PPM has an agreement with the independents, he couldn't be contacting the governor to say that he has a majority, because Section 49(2) is very clear. It says where a political party gains a majority of the seats of elected members of the Legislative Assembly, the governor shall appoint as premier the elected members of the Assembly, recommended by a majority of the elected members who are members of that party.
Yeah.
So if the independents are not members of the PPM,
Exactly.
they cannot send a recommendation to the governor saying who the premier is.
Exactly.
That has to go to the assembly, and have vote has to be taken. And we'll see if they haven't got an agreement now, and even when they had an agreement in writing where it was signed, anything could happen while that vote is being conducted in the assembly. People could change their minds while voting, and the agreement that they have in writing could be different at the end of the vote.
And that vote is that's by secret ballot.
That's by
also.
secret ballot.
Yes.
And after the vote is cast, they can ask for a division, and then you'll know who voted for who and who didn't vote for who. But suppose all of them vote for each other.
But if it's intended to be a secret ballot, then should a division, would it be proper then for a division to be held in this particular instance?
I saw it happen before.
Yes? Oh, okay.
I saw it happen before, where they wanted to know who voted voted for who, and that was in the Norman Borden government when all 12 members of the Legislative Assembly, as it was then, voted for Mr. Norman Borden, and gave him the leadership of the EXCO as it was then. So I don't know what's going to happen, but I know for sure if the independent members don't join the PPM, there has to be a vote in the Legislative Assembly.
Yeah. Now, Mr. Risa, you mentioned earlier about a mandate. Is there a mandate coming out of the results of these elections? Some may argue that the progressives received or were able to successfully have elected 7 of their members, plus, and I keep saying plus or minus 1, but on the ballot paper, Honorable Tara Rivers is identified as an independent. Is there a mandate, or do we get a consensus from the people that they are really leaning more towards independence?
That seems to be the case. That there, and can I, before I even try to answer that, there is this idea of vote selling, and I kept hearing that resonating time and time and time again, of folks who had a lot of money, who were willing to use such funding to influence our election. And perhaps that is something that we discuss for another day. And, folks are saying that that may have explained some of the reasons why the progressives were able to get some of their members elected. That aside, what was consistent in the messaging from the independents was the idea of change, the idea of dealing with unemployment. I mean, one minister was actually ousted in the Bordentown area, arguably based on the legal practitioners bill. And in that encapsulated a lot of the concerns that Caymanians had about not being given fair opportunities, not getting employment. People talked about the cost of living time and time and time again. The independents came out of the ring with this resonating sound of change being in the air. They talked about one party delivering, talking about corruption and transparency, and then the other party, when they got in, their behavior was no different. So Caymanians kept saying, we want to see something different. That seems to me about change.
Okay. I want to switch back again, Dr. Macfield, to the meetings of the Legislative Assembly.
Yes.
But we only have about 2 minutes or so we can still continue with that. Now, we heard questions being repeated on this show about the when is the legislature. Is there a time frame within which, after an election, the legislature must meet? We have pointed out that by convention, it has always been 1 week after.
Mm-hmm.
Now,
Yes.
if you, based on what transpired over the weekend, premier for a day, no longer premier, another premier for a day.
Or a few hours.
Or for a few hours. If you have struck a deal now that you believe is quite solid, would you actually wait until Wednesday to go down to the Legislative Assembly?
I would call it back today.
Yes.
If I had struck a deal, if I was in the position that they're in right now, and struck a deal that I think would hold on Sunday, I would have sent the recommendation to. I would have sent the order to the notice to the governor on Sunday to say, please convene the Legislative Assembly this morning or this afternoon, so the vote could be taken, so I could have my government conformed and move on. As it is now, there is no time limit in the Constitution, and as we have said on this show before, the cabinet as it is now continues. As the cabinet of the executive of the country until a new cabinet is sworn in, and so there's no time limit, and that is a safeguard in the Constitution that has the checks and balances, so that the government the country will not be without a government in between elections, because it envisages that something like this might happen, and therefore that is how it's written in the Constitution, that the ministers continue in the cabinet until a new cabinet is sworn in.
Now, we heard promises during the campaign, and even after some persons were victorious in the elections, were successful, that they would be consulting with their constituents.
Yeah.
I wonder how much consultation took place between the results on Wednesday and as we speak today, or how many of them were just simply scrambling to try to get a ministerial position or something otherwise, or as opposed to going back to their grassroots, going back to their constituents, telling them what has been happening, and getting their advice on that. Let's talk about that when we return from the news, folks. I want to remind you that you're listening to For the Record. I'm your host, Dorrit Connor. My guests in the studio with me this morning, Ms. Teresa Pitcairn and Dr. Steve Macfield. Please stay tuned for The Record. We'll be back immediately after the news. Good morning and welcome back to For the Record. In the studio with me this morning, Ms. Teresa Pitcairn and Dr. Steve McField. Dr. McField, before we went to the commercial break, I think you were talking about the meeting, possible meeting at the Legislative
Yes.
Assembly, and you also referencing Section 49 of the
yes.
Constitution.
Yeah, I said that what has to take place now is a meeting at the Legislative Assembly. And if I was in the shoes of the Premier, Mr. McLaughlin, because he's still Premier, until when he's a new Premier sworn in. If I was in his shoes and I had an agreement with the independents to form a government, I would quickly get the governor to convene the assembly to have the vote that is necessary for me to form to form the government on the section 49.3. That is what has to be that's what has to take place now. And even then you're not even then you might not be so secured, because even if you have an agreement, someone might change their mind during the vote, and therefore I would want to see the vote quickly as possible and have those votes counted, and then I would then recommend to the governor who the other 6 ministers are going to be in the government. That would be, and I would, if I had an agreement yesterday, I would be calling back the assembly no later than today.
Mm-hmm. One of our listeners has said, "Good morning. So, if the cabinet continues until a new one is sworn in, does that mean that the ministers that were voted out are still in power?" That is a bit confusing. That's what we have maintained, that yes, that is the situation. There is only one government in place now, or one executive, I should say, until such time
as another executive is appointed.
Right, the LA meets, yes.
Yes.
Of course, they would probably not undertake any major decisions during this period, and it is quite possible that those who were not re-elected probably didn't even go back to their offices to pack their things. If they didn't pack them before the elections, they'd call someone and say, "Pack up my things for me."
Yes, your first point. By convention, they would not have taken any major decisions, right. But some government does.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, some.
Yes, some people in some countries, some government does do that.
Anything to add to that, Mr. Risa?
No, not at all. Someone just sent a note that there's a new configuration with persons that are grouping to lead. Yep. No comment on that at all.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Let's look at manifestos, right?
Yes.
We've had the PPM publish the manifesto. The CDP published the manifesto. The independent candidates, they all had their independent manifestos. With a coalition government, if we end up with a coalition of PPM and independents, or if we end up with a coalition of CDP and independents, how do we get a clear idea of the direction that the government, that the country is going to be headed? What policies are going to come in place? If we look at the UK, for instance, when the Tories, the Conservative Party, and the Liberals came into power, of course, the leader of the Liberal Party became Deputy Prime Minister, and David Cameron was the Prime Minister. There were certain things that Cameron had on his agenda, like, for instance, the referendum on Brexit, that he carried through, because those were things on his agenda. How much do we see being one of the major parties' agenda as well as the independents? How do we parse all of this out now?
Well, I guess, Ori, that if you have an agreement, all of those things would have been hampered, would have been arranged in the agreement. This is what I want. This is my agenda. These are the things I want to accomplish in my agenda. If you're the independents, and the government say this is our agenda, and this is the things that we expect you to support. And so there has to be a compromise. Like as I have already said, compromise is one of the principal tenets of democracy, of the democratic system. You have to have a compromise between them. Otherwise, it wouldn't last very long.
That's right.
Mm-hmm.
I agree
Yes.
completely. First of all, they have to grow up, and they have to start behaving as principled people that we can respect. That's the first thing. And honoring the promises that they made to the people. So Steve is right in what he's saying. Folks will have sat down. They will have said, this is what, well, I hope, they will have got around a table and says, this was the mandate that I gave to the Caymanian people, even running as an independent. And as I've said before, I don't think that there were really any ideological differences between our parties and groupings and so on. So that being said, so for example, certain folks will say we'll run on the basis of looking at the cost of living. I know Chris has always been discussing the whole idea of forfeiture, closures, and that sort of thing, and about electricity cost and so on. So there will have been a list of issues that they ran on, which arguably are inconsistent with those ideas that the existing progressives have. And if you go down that list, what are the issues that you can see that there is a meeting of the mind on? There will be a meeting of the mind on education, I believe. And, we look at that and talk about what's the best way forward. There will be a meeting of the mind on the legal practitioners bill. There must be some compromise in that in some area. There will be a meeting of the mind in terms of what to do about the cost of living, because that is so glaring. The concerns may be about issues like the dock. People may be pro-dock, others may be anti-dock, or they may be concerned about where do you place that dock. So there are ancillary big-based budget matters that people will argue with. But if they can agree on certain of the main tenets under which this whole election got its grip and its, if they can agree those things in respect to the people who elected them, because in my mind, I've said before, people wanted independence, so if they can agree those things and respect the people that, elected them, I think we would be moving forward. And as Steve rightly said, we also have to get a grouping that the United Kingdom is going to be happy with as well. That is really, really, really important.
Is it?
I think so.
Why is it important that we make the UK happy?
Well, unless we are independent. I mean, let us, if you want to speak the truth, let us talk, let's speak. Yeah, I believe that plays a role. If they don't, if they are not happy with certain things, they will shake their head and say, well, this is a little difficult to work with.
And they will say, well, they don't agree with our budget. We go back to that old era again,
It's a hard time.
Where they give us a hard time. And but two of the things that comes to mind that both parties spoke about in sometimes different terms. Number one is the 119 of the Constitution, the district councils.
Yes.
All of them say that they wanted district councils to be established. How they're going to be established now, I don't know, because we have a district councils law. Whether that's going to be amended, I don't know. The other thing that comes to mind is moving the work permit system from immigration into a labor under the auspices of the Minister of Labor, and have the labor minister be responsible for handing out work permits. I don't know how that is going to work, because I don't think that the PPM canvas that too much on their platform.
What about crime? That was also an issue that people had concerns about. The role of the police. What happens when the governor does not actually honor his or her responsibility under the Constitution?
Yes.
What then is the responsibility of the premier or or his cabinet? Let's to look at that as well and talk a little bit about how that is going to affect us.
Yes, and what about some amendments to the Constitution to allow members who are not in cabinet to support cabinet.
Yeah, and the proper functioning
proper
of that.
function
because
of that.
we've sort of like stretched the Constitution.
Well, it's
a little bit
unconstitutional
in
right now as it is.
Yes. One of our listeners has written in and says, my considered opinion is that Ms. Teresa's statement that the election's results cannot be interpreted in any other way must be correct. That is to say, that the country wants independence to come together to form government must be the only true interpretation. The fact that politicians are able to maneuver around the election results in a grab for control of the steering wheel of the good ship Cayman is an unfortunate byproduct of the democratic system. In an ideal world, all persons truly interested in taking the country forward in the manner intended by the results of the election should be prepared to abandon party standards in favor of constitutional responsibility to the people of these islands. I think that is well said. Now, what I'll add to that is, and I'll have a question. You know, one of my friends on the weekend said, OC is to blame for all of this. OC is to blame for all of this. Of course, I took the responsibility on my shoulder. And why was OC to blame? Oh, because he advocated for one person, one vote. He was the one that was strongly pushing that on the radio and everything. So he's to be blamed for the situation. Tell me now, folks, how much did one person, one vote play a role in the results of the election and the dilemma that we found ourselves in on the weekend? And I must say that we still find ourselves in because we really don't know what the final decision is.
Well, I can tell you this. One person, one vote clearly shows that you cannot stand aside from your electoral district and try to get elected on achievements. That is for sure. and that is illustrated by what Mr. Hughes said on Wednesday night after the election when we had the interview with him. And then subsequently the comments in the newspaper have said so many comments about, well, Mr. Archer was the best financial secretary, best financial minister of finance, and therefore he was one of the best people in the government, and therefore he lost his seat. Well, the one man, one vote, which the one man, one vote, which is supposed to create more accountability and more responsibility to your electoral districts, clearly shows that didn't happen on Mr. Archer's watch. Because Mr. Hughes said that he was surprised that Mr. Archer had gotten all these accolades of being the best financial minister of finance in the Caribbean and so forth. But how did that resonate in Central? How does that help people in Central with the price of salt beef? How does that help people in Central when their tin roof is leaking and they have to have their bucket to catch the water to keep their house dry? How does that help people in Central who don't have shoes to wear to school, or who don't have money to buy lunch to send their children to school, or even clothes? How does that help them with their car loans and their house loans? It's a complete disconnect. What has to happen? What the one man vote does is that you have to be
you have to have a good
tied
relationship
to your constituency with an umbilical cord.
Yeah.
And it shows you that you have to pound the pavement in your constituency, sell yourself, because politics is a selling game. You have to sell your idea, you have to sell your policies, you have to sell your vision to the people. And Kenneth did it the old way. He pounded the pavement, he went from door to door, he looked people in the eye, he shook the hands, and he did politics 101 the old way, and that's how he got elected.
Okay. But
so you can't get elected if you're aloof and you want to talk about, well, this is why I achieve. But how does that help them. They don't care about achievement. Those achievements are something that you can talk about in the dining rooms and in the hall and in the drawing rooms in Governor's Harbor or probably South Sound, but not in Central.
Or at the cocktail parties.
Or cocktail parties, but not in Central.
Folks, please stay tuned. For the Record is going to take a commercial break. We will be back shortly. Good morning. Welcome back to For the Record with Dr. Steve Macfield and Ms. Teresa Pitcairn. Ms. T, before we went to the break, you wanted to say, add something to what Dr. Macfield was saying.
Right. So what Steve articulated was the importance of having a really good relationship with the persons that are running and with respect to one man, one vote. My concern as I started the show is how do we allow politicians to stay principled and deliver on their promises? So we saw in East End and North Side what happens when you take an independent view. And an independent view is not necessarily something that is different from a view that a sitting government may have. But you get into the politics of personalities and people taking issues personal. And as a result, the district suffers because you will have governments who will be so irresponsible that a personal grievance that they may or may not have with someone actually penalizes the particular community that they're living in. So the question is whether or not the population now or voters now haven't seen how this has all played out, where the politicians they developed manifestos promising that, they're going to get rid of poverty, they're going to deal with crime, they're going to deal with economic growth and all these issues. How can they now deliver on their promises? Bearing in mind we have the situation of independents versus parties, because as Steve was rightly saying, it is usually the case when you're in a party, you're structured, you're organized, you know what the tenets are, you know what you want to deliver over a 4-year period. So the independents may well run and say that these are the principles that they have, these are the things that they'd like to achieve. But if these things, it'll be very, very difficult based on what we have seen over the years as to whether or not they're going to be successful given the nature of our politics, the culture of our politics, and the nature of power, with the politicians want to hold on to. I keep hearing people talking about the power grab and the thiefing. I hadn't heard thiefing in a very, very long time, but my phone has been littered with this whole idea of thiefing, as we used to call it. And how does that prevent leadership from being sensitized to the needs of the people who actually got them elected? That is a huge concern that I have, because what it then does, it encourages our leaders to be unprincipled and thinking that, and then we think that they're liars. They run, they may have a genuine desire to actually execute the mandate that they ran on. But if no one is picking it up that has the majority, the particular community will suffer and really suffer as a result.
In such a small community of ours, 60-odd thousand population, if we accept some of the figures, some people feel that it's more
like
or some people say in the upper 50s as well. But in a small community that we have, what do you say to those independent candidates who may not become a part of the government? What do you say to them in terms of the way they go about seeking to deliver something to their constituents as opposed to sitting in opposition and waiting for 4 years to possibly change the equation? Should they be embracing I shouldn't say embracing, but should they be seeking to collaborate, to converse with the government? We know that there's a particular section in the Constitution,
yes,
Dr. Steve, that speaks to the fact that if that district has no representation in cabinet, that they're allowed to, I believe it's on a quarterly basis.
Yes, to go to
bear
cabinet, yes.
in cabinet. If you can find that for me, and at some point in time, we will read that particular section. But Ms. T, how do those independents now go about seeking to get something for their constituents?
So I'll start again with the Westminster system, which speaks about to the victor goes the spoils, right? So that folks are not necessarily and I don't know how we manage to do this, because as you rightly say, we're a small community. People will put you in isolation and send your community in a prison for 4 years simply because they don't like you or simply because you challenge them. The concern is not about putting the community front and center of every decision that they make. Someone said to me recently that when money pass hands to support parties, that's an investment in the community, it not thieving. So we're gonna have to have responsible leadership and invite those who are recently elected, because people say they want change and they say the new blood will start to bring about this kind of change. I am hoping that we allow our leaders to stand on their feet in a principled position, not just jockeying things about you get this, I get that, or whatever, but start with the premise, this is what our community needs. Gentlemen, let's leave our egos outside. We've done the measurement, we've done that thing. Let us now look at what the community needs. Let us list the sort of things that we can agree on. Can we do that? And can we embrace this? Let's forget about the fighting that we've had over the years. My view is that our LA has been toxic for too long with the kind of disagreement that people have had in that house, which mitigates against doing what is right for the Caymanian people.
Okay, we have one caller. Let's go to the phone lines. Caller, good morning. Welcome to For the Record.
Good morning.
Good morning,
Good morning.
sir.
Good
How are you
morning.
doing, Devil?
For the record and the panel, this I want.
Good
Morning,
morning,
Mr.
Mr.
Evan.
Devil.
I was listening a little bit, but I got disconnected. They were on the road. I agree with Dr. Steve that you cannot. It's hard to run a country without a party. If the independents, they got their own personal agenda that goes up in there, and you see the mess we got you now. And the party is here to stay. Teresa, the independent runs out of 4 candidates. The parties run 27. And the parties picked up 10 seats. So people still vote more for parties while they vote for independent. Anyway you want to put it. But I'm glad we're getting a little closer to, if they got something together, they should go to assembly today and get over it.
Agree.
Don't leave it again from one thing to the next, because you all know as much as I know about these things. There's a lot of influence and money is behind all these things, so anything can happen again. We wake up 12 from now, we hear something different again. So I suggest that quicker we get that behind us and work for the betterment of the country. And I encourage all the voters to be more, we got to be more accountable. Because we got to hold them accountable. We do all things to get them elected, then we go sleep and let them do what they want to do. Pass the laws that benefit them and left us behind. So in the future, from now on, the voters should be more accountable from now on.
Thank you very much.
And easier now, because you know exactly who is responsible for who you voted for.
Okay. Thank you very much, caller, for that. Very, very good point. Very good point.
That's good
One
point,
more
yeah.
caller. Caller, good morning. Welcome to For the Record.
Hello.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning, folks.
Good morning, ma'am.
Hope you're fine, thanks. Hope you all had a good weekend.
Thanks, and we hope you did as well.
Okay, I have 2 questions. It pertains to election. I would like to ask questions. I was reading something on the news. I think it was on Saturday. I think it was Cayman 27, where Mr. Howell from the elections office said that there were some notes about that there were the absentee ballot box that was from South Sound had disappeared for about 2 hours. What I would like to find out, and I guess you all can see if you can help us, who, I thought the absentee ballot box was actually presented back to Mr. Howell after the box was finished. Can you tell me who keeps that box once the absentee ballots was turned back in that was supposed to be carried to the poll wherever the election was being taken place for the counting? Who had that box at that time? Because Mr. Howell is saying that he didn't know where the box was for 2 hours.
Okay, and the other question?
And we want to know. Sorry, I'll leave the next question for later. I need somebody to confirm something to me first. I'll call you back on that one.
Okay, caller. Well, I think we're going to take a commercial break first, and then when we return from the commercial break, we will give you your answer in relation to the postal ballot box. Not only the postal ballot box, but also the one for mobile voting as well. Please stay tuned for the record. We'll be back shortly. Good morning and welcome back to For the Record. In the studio with me, Dr. Steve Macfield, Ms. Teresa Pitcairn. Last caller posed a question to us and was asking about mobile voting, postal voting, or absentee voting, was the word that she used, ballot box being missing for several hours. All of those ballot boxes, as Mr. Howell indicated on once when he called in, they're stored in a safe location. He didn't indicate where, but there were cameras there. There was 24/7 security around where those ballot boxes were stored. Now, the returning officer for each constituency is the person who has responsibility for those, not the supervisor of election of sorts. He certainly provides the environment where they can be stored, because you don't want returning officers having to store them at their homes or whatever. Likewise, on election day, they're stored there. When it is time for the returning officer to commence the count, that returning officer will then collect those ballot boxes from the location that they're stored by the supervisor of elections, and then take them to the counting station. So they're under the sole responsibility of the returning officer. They're under that returning officer's control as well. So that should answer the question for that caller. Another listener has written and said, "Good morning, Mr. Connor, and good morning to your guests. I believe that the hallmark of a democratic society is the systematic, orderly, and peaceful convening of elections at a prescribed time. The holding of free and fair elections serves many purposes, one of which is to give the people the opportunity to make decisions about the political direction they prefer and the personnel to take them there. It is all about the will of the people. Free and fair elections restores the balance of power to the people and keeps the elected representatives mindful about who holds ultimate power in government. What is taking place at this time is nothing short of disappointing, as the election results and subsequent attempts at collaboration have revealed that the system allows for the denial of this sacred right the people enjoy. How can it be right for politicians to get the people's vote on particular stands and perceived principles, and then promptly throw this away in their haste to be on the, quote, government bench? I believe that some collaboration is needed at this time, but it has to be done in consultation with the people and in concord with their will. That is my opinion. Speaks volumes what the caller has said.
I agree.
And any comments, Miss Teresa? I know that this falls right in line with what you've been saying as well.
Yeah, and it is. In fact, I'd like to hear what Steve has to say on it, because that has been, and people say that gender has a role with that, and I don't know if our politics has demonstrated that gender plays a role in bringing about some balance and compromise and so on. So I'd like to hear what Dr. Steve has to say on that.
Well, it goes back to some of the things that we started to say when we opened this particular program about independence. One independent said, and I think that's the reason why we asked the question, didn't we, Orit, on election night?
7 plus
What
1.
are your position? What is your position now, and what will your position be? Will you still support the PPM? And Miss Rivers said that she had to go back to her people.
That's what she said.
To get their advice of where she should be. I think during the break you said perhaps she might go to her committee, but her committee is probably not the people. I would expect you would go back to your people. You would have town hall meetings with them. You would explain to them the situation that you're in, and you would have them to give you the vote as to what you should do. I mean, we saw that in 1962, on its 18th and 19th of January 1962, when the governor came down here and told us that Jamaica was going into independence, and they were giving Cayman a self-governing constitution with a chief minister, and the governor then put the vote to the Caymanian people and asked them what they wanted to do, and they opted out to reject to the full internal self-government with a chief minister and became a crown colony, directly ruled by the United Kingdom. So I think what in this respect to the person who sent you the note. What the politicians should do, they should go back to their constituencies now, and they should say, here's the position we're in. We'd like to know if we should join this group or that group, and this is what position they are going to give us, whether we should accept them or not.
You see, OC, I've always been someone who believed in this idea of a social contract between the people and between those that we elect. And personally, I believe that our leaders have been woefully delinquent in not being able to honor the wishes of the people and vacillate. And, invariably they breach that social contract. But, I was listening to the young man that is responsible for filming since I've been here for the past couple of months, and listening to the concerns that he has raised. And essentially he has said that, Ms. Teresa, I hear what you and Dr. Steve and OC keep saying. You go to the Constitution, you try to educate us about what the Constitution requires, but at the end of the day, we as a people feel powerless. We really feel powerless because the decisions are made on an arbitrary basis, not giving the people the respect that they deserve each time they go to the polls. And here we are again, right where we started with this whole idea of a breach of that social contract.
Yeah. One of our listeners has written in and says, when does the UK play a role in this decision of our government? When would they step in if necessary? Is this in our constitution?
No, the UK doesn't have any power under our constitution to step in this situation.
But we did voice the fact that the UK may have some concerns.
They may have some concerns that they will voice through their governor, through their representative here. But the UK doesn't have any power to step in to do anything. What would be the next step? Really, the next step would be if after a time that you can't form a government, that you don't have a majority on either side, the governor could probably call another election. That would be the sensible thing to do. In fact, that would be the only thing to do before the UK actually step in. It would have to be completely chaos for the UK to step in. But if after a period of time,
Reasonable period.
a reasonable period of time, and nobody got a majority to form a government, the governor might call another election.
Yeah.
She has that power to do so. So that would be the first step before the UK would be able to step in.
Okay, we have one caller. Let's see if we can take that caller before we go to our headline news. Caller, good morning. Welcome to For the Record.
Yeah, good morning, OC.
Morning, sir.
Mr. Mark Field and Mr. Teresa. How are you?
Good morning.
Yeah, just a quick question, and then I'll hang up. To Mr. Connor, if you could get Mr. Howell to confirm that missing box that was gone for 2 hours, if you could get that confirmed with him, the public would appreciate that.
Yeah, caller, we what we don't want to do is we don't want to spread rumors at this point in time, because I have, other than what one caller called in, there has been no confirmation whatsoever of any missing box, and we were all around this table on election night,
Yes.
and we heard nothing about a missing box or a late count because of a missing box. So we don't want to continue to perpetuate that notion until we're able to confirm it.
Yeah, but Mr. Connor, we heard that from election night. Some areas where we were.
We heard we had a premiere on Saturday night too.
Yes.
From
Friday
election night. But another question, I guess it don't make no sense that. But anyhow, that was my concern, because we heard it from the election night, right at the polling station at where I was.
Mm-hmm.
That this box was missing for 2 hours. So it would have been.
Tell me exactly what you heard and who you heard it from.
Well, it came up on our phone. Somebody texted.
Oh,
No.
we heard that some minister was under house arrest too
It was
during
on
the
Facebook.
election.
Yes.
It was on Facebook, you know. It was on Facebook. So
That's the worst
I don't
place
know,
for you
but
to get your
anyhow,
information.
I even forget the other question that I wanted to ask. Anyhow, thank you.
Okay, if you remember it, do call back. But we're not going to perpetuate any rumors on this station in relation to postal ballot box. I was a returning officer on several elections and worked the elections for 30 years. I know what happens, with those boxes. Not only postal ballot box, but if it was postal ballot, it should have been the mobile voting as well, because the returning officer has custody of both of those boxes as well. Folks, please stay tuned. We're going to headline news now. When we return, our discussion will continue with Dr. Steve Macfield and Ms. Teresa Pitcairn. Good morning. Welcome back to For the Record. We're on the final half hour of our show now with Dr. Steve Macfield and Ms. Teresa Pitcairn. Ms. Teresa, to you.
Right. So we were talking a little bit about the social contract and the idea of pay for play in our politics, as opposed to the will of the people. And I was saying that perhaps Dr. Macfield could have his way.
Yeah, I was saying to both of you that it's not too late now for them to have town hall meetings. Since there's an impasse, since neither of the parties and the independents got a majority to form a government, and they have to now negotiate with each other. The politicians who are part of not the parties, because the parties understands where they are, and they have their agenda already, but the independent people now, who we all agree that the people voted for change when they voted for them. They should go back to their constituencies now, and they should say to their constituents, to their electoral districts now, they could say, here is the position. They have 8, we have 8, and the other one has 3. This is the position that we are in now. We have to form a government, and there has to be negotiations. This is what we believe can come out of the negotiations, that we can be a part of the government, or we can be part of the opposition, or we can be the opposition. But we would like you to advise us what you want to do, since you just gave us your vote. And they should take the advice of the people and not sit down behind closed doors and try to hack out an agreement, which, as you have seen before, even when someone put their...
Not what the paper is written on.
even when someone put their signature on the paper, The next day, the signature didn't even have the value of the paper. The paper was more valuable than the signature. And so what they should do now, it's not too late. They should go back to their constituencies and they should advise them what agreement they have had before the Legislative Assembly meets. Next.
Okay, we have 3 callers. Let's go to the phone lines. Callers, we're going to ask you to be as concise as possible because we want to accommodate all of you. First caller, good morning. Welcome to For the Record.
Good morning, Mr. O.C.
Good morning, ma'am.
Good morning, Mr. Risa and Dr. Steve.
Good morning, ma'am.
Georgia Bank. And you know I'm not long-winded. I only want to make one statement. In one of my meditation books, a minister said, for many years, he thought he was working for God, and he did work for God, but he found out he needed to work along with God. And that is the way our politicians should act too. They work for us, and please let us have some input at times, and then things, I believe, would go quite smoothly. Thank you very much, sir, and God bless you all.
Thank you very much, Mr. Georgia. Thank you very much for that contribution. Next caller, good morning. Welcome to For the Record.
Good morning, O.C.
Morning, sir.
I'm going to be concise as you can get.
Okay.
Just backing up here, and Mr. George, my good old friend there, spoke of this missing box. Sorry, good morning to you all.
Good
Mr.
morning,
Teresa
good morning, sir.
and
Good
Dr.
morning.
Steve.
Good morning, Mr.
Sorry
Hill.
for my bad manners. I was just trying to get this out quick because O.C. going to run me off the radio.
No.
I forgot to tell you all good morning. What George just said, guys, it would take the biggest magician in the world or the best magician in the world to disappear one of those boxes. Let me tell you something. I sat in on those counting of those boxes 4 years ago. There's no way those boxes didn't disappear. That is all like a Brian answer story. That cannot happen about missing boxes and stole boxes and, oh, God, that's rubbish. You can't get out from, you cannot disappear. Those boxes cannot disappear. There are too many eyes in those boxes. Those boxes are sealed, and they're put on a bus, traveled with everybody that were in that room, plus the police and the guards and the observers. So I don't know how these boxes can disappear. Like I said, it has to be one of the finest and best magician in the world to let one of those boxes disappear. So I say, guys, Cayman, that's a Brian answer story. Have a good day. Thank you.
Thank you very much, caller. Appreciate you supporting and substantiating that as well. Next caller, good morning. Welcome to For the Record.
Good morning. I'll call you back again.
Yes, ma'am. No problem at all.
Sure. About the next question that I had. Well, I guess I can speak, on behalf of the whole voters. We would like to know what time as we were told, I guess over the weekend, that there had already been a government formed between the Premier McKeever Bush and his party, and the independents, whatever outcome was. Now we're here it's changed. We would like to know what time will the next government, or if there's another new government again that the public does not know about, that we don't have no confirmation, what time will they be bringing it to the public? So, because I think that the voters should have a say. As you can see what Mr. Bush did, he said he made a ruling, and his constituents and the people across the island decided that that's not what they wanted, and they went back and they negotiated. Because we would like to know, are they going to leave it till the last moment that the people has no say? Or I think that the governor needs to step in, because this is so unfair to the people that voted, and the majority had a vote, and they should have at least a little bit of respect, as they claimed that they were, especially the independents claimed that they would not do anything before they come to their constituents, whether it's West Bay, East End, or wherever they be. And now we're left in a blinded corner, as we're supposed to imagine who's going to be. And I don't think that is fair to the voting public, because they should have a say too.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, caller. Yeah, we've said here that we need certainty, we need clarity. Go ahead, Dr.
We need clarity and certainty, and the caller is right. And I think that before they any vote in the Legislative Assembly, they should go back to their constituents, to their electoral districts, and explain to them what they have decided, and to get their acquiescence. Because the vote is only a week old, It's not even a week old yet. And I mean already, if it's not even a week old yet, and you haven't consulted your constituents on such a major decision that you're making on their behalf, that doesn't seem right to me.
Now, do you equate? This is probably a silly question, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Does consulting with your committee, your election committee, equate to consulting with your constituents?
Not really.
No, you have to go
not
another
really.
step.
No,
step
not
further.
at all.
Okay.
No.
Just want to make that clear.
That committee was only put together to get you elected. Now that you are elected by all the people, you owe your allegiance to all the people, not just the committee.
Mm-hmm. But again, comparing and contrasting parties as opposed to independents. See, the progressives don't have to do that now because they're the party.
Neither the CDP has
to do that. It's the independents.
It's the independents that should do that because they're not a party.
Yeah.
What Caymanians seem to be doing, and I haven't seen this before, is that they really want to make that whole concept of democracy a reality. They want it to be a participatory democracy where they have their say, where they can remove the players that left them with so little and move on. As Dr. McField was speaking about the whole issue in Central, where there seemed to be a disconnect between leadership and the people that are there. I think that alone actually tells communicates a clear message in that folks had better start listening, because I saw that there were ministers even over by the legislative building talking about leadership and that sort of thing and what their expectations are. Caymanians are actually insisting now on some kind of participatory democracy where their voices are heard, because they're so tired of living in a community that they call their home and not having a say. And they're saying that we don't want that say to just be every 4 years. We want it to be now.
Okay. Before we go to the next caller, we have one listener who has written in again, and we're going to try to say this as loud and as clear as possible, because we've said it on several occasions this morning already and on previous shows as well. This person has said, please clarify what the Constitution says about the amount of time between a general election and the appointment of the Speaker of the House and the Premier. Does this have to take place this coming Wednesday? One more time for us, Dr. Steve.
No, it does not have to take place this coming Wednesday. There is no provision in the Constitution that says when the governor should recall the assembly after a general election. And as far as the Constitution is concerned, the cabinet ministers continue to be cabinet ministers until when other ministers are sworn in or they are resworn. So that is the position. There is no time limit.
And we have said by convention it is usually within a week.
By convention it's usually within a week.
We don't know if it
because that is when you know who is going to form the government.
Yes.
It's usually within a week. Where this position where we don't know, it might take a month or 2 or 3 months. So we don't know how, because the Constitution is silent on that.
It's certainly taking longer than it does to cook a turtle stew.
Yes, right. Yes, right.
Let's go to the phone lines. 2 callers. First caller, good morning. Welcome to For the Record.
Good morning to you again.
Good morning again, ma'am. As succinct as possible. Mm-hmm.
Quickly as possible. What do you think, Sir, Mr. Connor, Mr. McField, and Mr. Kent, if it is proven that any of these, any individual who may have gained, who may have, let's say, won in this election, if it can be proven that disbursement of funds, disbursement of furniture, disbursement of anything was a key factor or was likely a key factor in the decision making by the voters. What do you think should happen in a situation such as that? Mr. McField, I will go directly to you, sir.
Well, first they would have to be an investigation to see if those rumors are facts. And if they are fact, then that would be an offense under the elections law. And then that person would be prosecuted.
So it's the police and the courts.
Police it through the courts, and then there would be the other, and then there would be the other thing, whether or not the person should lose their seat as a result of the conviction under
election offense. Yes. Mr. Risa, anything to add?
Yeah, I mean, I'm in agreement with Dr. Steve. Someone sent me a note about when you traverse certain areas, there was no fill for 4 years. And then within the last week of the elections, you saw fills spurting up in people's homes. My concern with something like that is that it also actually puts the average voter under scrutiny. And that voter may or may not have the economic wherewithal, which is why people tend to take which is why you tend to hear about corruption with funding and so on. Because if people had the opportunity to work and live in a society where, they can get a fair income, you wouldn't see that level of corruption that we tend to have here in our alleged corruption that we tend to have here in the community. But Steve is spot on with what he has said.
Okay, we're going to a commercial break. We still have, I believe, one caller on hold. 2 callers. We're going to ask those callers to please hang tightly with us. Taking a quick commercial break. When we return, we will take your call. So please stay tuned. Good morning. Welcome back to For the Record. 2 persons on hold. Let's go to the first caller. Good morning. Welcome to For the Record.
Good morning, gentlemen.
Good morning, sir.
Good morning, sir.
Right.
And lady, Mr. Reese is here.
Oh, okay, sorry about that. Morning, ladies, as well. I should have said morning, ladies first, I suppose.
Sorry.
Just a quick question. I think Mr. McField said, or Dr. McField, when the House was dissolved, we had what he termed as, I guess, housekeeping.
Yes.
Now, my question is, how long can we go on with housekeeping or whatever it was called before we actually have to have an official government in place? That's my question. How long can we go on? According to what he's saying about the Constitution, I'm kind of confused, and maybe he can give me some enlightenment in that situation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, caller. We'll get you to answer that, Dr. McField. Once, 2 more? Okay. Caller, good morning. Welcome to For the Record.
Yes, good morning. How are you?
Fine. How are you?
Pretty good. Good morning to Dr. McField and Mr. Risa.
Morning.
Good morning, sir.
Yes, Dr. McField, this is Moxham here.
Okay, good. I'm Mr. Moxham. How are you?
Not too bad, man. When you said about a little while ago that the ministers is still in charge, what was the House not dissolved?
Yes, the House is dissolved, but the ministers are still ministers in the cabinet until when a new set is
Well, if the House is dissolved, how they can still be ministers?
Because that is how it is. That is.
When we say the House is dissolved, that means that all the proceedings of the House, the meetings of the House will no longer take place unless there is an emergency to recall it.
But
it doesn't mean that
it doesn't mean that the cabinet is gone. The cabinet still exists.
Okay, so then if a hurricane was threatening now and the ministers that were in charge, they would be in charge.
Definitely.
Exactly. And they could recall the members of the Legislative Assembly as well.
Yes, and they could recall the members, yes.
Yes. Mr. McField, remember we mentioned on the election night about you saying that, I think, if I didn't misunderstand you, I don't think, that independents had run the country before?
Yes.
And you remember you saying that the independents decided to put a team together, whether with a United Democratic or some sort of team like that?
That was in 1965.
1965.
When you had the National Democrats and the Christian Democrats.
Okay.
And the National Democrats lost the election.
I see.
And they lost the majority, and the independents, along with Captain Ellen Cockernell and Barnes Ruddy and all of them formed the government with Mr. Willa Farrington, who was from the
Okay,
Christian
well then
Democrats.
what it was that you said that night that you said it took place in 1976 with that Mr. Jim Borden?
Well, in 1976 you had, but they were not independents. You had the unity team.
Okay.
That was a de facto government. In other words, that was a government in fact. That was a party a de facto party. That was a party in fact. The only thing, they did not have any formality, written constitution, but that was a really powerful political organization that Mr. Jim Borden put together with the unity team. And between 1976 and 1984, it formed. It involved the largest and the most strongest middle class that Cayman had ever seen. Between those 1976 to 84 years.
Take place now that these guys have been elected. Could that same sort of form of government take place now, or the Constitution wouldn't allow that?
Well, the problem is that everyone ran separately. The unity team all ran together on the same platform. They were like a party, but they were not constituted as one, but they are a party in fact. That's what we say. It's a de facto party.
But some of the independents was on advertised and read the United Democratic Party, or the new party they have now, the CDP or whatever.
I don't know. I heard there were people supporting people, but they
had photos of candidates on the CDP party flags and banners.
Maybe that was just to get elected. Who knows? I don't know.
Well, I mean, if they're independent, then they shouldn't be on anybody else's banner. That is what I'm trying to say. Yes. So it is obvious that they were trying to put a party from the very beginning, even though they went out as independent.
Yes.
Caller, we're going to ask you to leave us there because we have a few callers and we have about 5 minutes left to go on the show as well. Thank you very much, for that, and we're trusting that we answered your question. Next caller, please. Caller, good morning. Welcome to For the Record.
Good morning to you, Mr. Moses, Dr. Steve.
Morning, sir.
Morning, sir.
Morning,
Again, it have never ceased to amaze me the questions that is just been asked. This one is really the people who didn't vote, I think, are just as important as those who voted. When you think what the question was asked to me is, will the elections office, since they know who did not vote, their names would not have been struck off the various voters' list, that they strike it off, so they know. And they're not intimidating anyone. If they were to try and get in touch with those people, this is what the visitor asked me, and it's an interesting position, and find out from them why they didn't vote, so they could, and which districts of the districts voted, had no voters, the most who didn't vote, and so forth, and find out from them why, so they could formulate and know whether this new system is working or not, or whether it should go back to the older system, not just one man, one vote, the whole district, or why they didn't vote, whether they couldn't find anyone to vote for, or they were just confused. And I just wondered what you think, if that's important. If you could just answer me if you think it's important to do such an investigation, or whatever you may call it, a poll or whatever. Because it might be important to find out if 3,000 of those 5,000 had voted, it might have made a very big difference in the outcome. I have to listen on. I have no radio. If I could just get a quick answer, what you all think if that should be done.
Thank you very much, sir. Dr. Steve?
Well, I think I go by what the independent observer said. They say it was a flawed system. The democracy was at its highest in the Cayman Islands. They gave us great accolades for having for engaging into the democratic system at its highest level. As far as the voters are concerned, I don't know why the voters don't vote. Perhaps you would need a social anthropologist to have a survey of all the voters to see why they didn't vote. Perhaps they didn't like the candidates, and perhaps they didn't want to vote, and who knows? But the majority of the electorate came out and voted, some 70+%, and that was a high number.
Okay, we have one more caller. Caller, good morning. Welcome to For the Record. This will be our last call.
Good morning, Mr. O.C. Good morning. Woo!
Morning.
Morning.
It's hot. Good morning, panel too. Sorry. Woo! What a hot Monday morning.
Yes.
Is it summer yet? My. It's so sad. It's so sad. Sometimes I feel like I cry. I feel like I cry this morning.
This is the Caribbean summer, Cayman summer.
Boy. I cannot believe this, boy. But you know something? I'm not a prophet, but I predict this will happen. You know, I predict this will happen. We're going to take long for reform of government. But anyway, the thing we have to do now is let's pray for them. Let's pray for them and pray for our country and see if we get things going. So Mr. O'C, take care today, sir.
Thank you very much, caller. Thank you very much for that. And I trust that everyone will heed your advice. Now, I have an email here. It is fairly long. I'm going to try to see if I can read it before we go off air. It's a person has called in and said, excellent show, blah, blah, blah. It seems, sadly, that all sorts of machinations are afoot. And clearly, Premier Alden has no desire to resign from control of this country regardless of what the voters have mandated. It appears that he does not want to even cede control to the incumbent deputy premier. I'm not sure where our listener or writer is getting that information from, but I'm only reading what has been said here. I hope that all the recently elected independents stand strong and don't let the ideals we have advocated and fought to defend in the recent elections campaign be displaced by political expediency under the mantle of the desire to assemble a government. I would ask you all to bear in mind that although it is stressful for everyone in this country to not have the constellation of cabinet settled forthwith, it is much more important that we get it right rather than get it quickly. There will be all sorts of pressures brought to bear, or I am certain, but all that each of you need to do is to trust your instinct and stand firm on the principles that you have so strenuously advocated. All the independents need to stand their ground. Alden cannot make any viable deal with McKeever that will stay together. I would also encourage Mr. Bernard Bush and Captain Eugene to consider their positions. I know that both of them are decent gentlemen, and they should now consider what is really best for the country. There are all decent people in the PPM ranks too. All members elect of the Legislative Assembly need to now act based on the principle and what is better for the country, not any person or party. To do anything less would make a mockery in advance of the oath they are about to take. I believe a cabinet comprised of no more than 3 PPM members and 3 or 4 independents and one CDP is what the country expects to see. And the fundamentals of democracy dictate that what the country wants, the country should get, and what it deserves to have. I would remind all of the recently elected MLAs in waiting. That is one of those defining moments in our political careers, which takes great strength and resolve to make it through. But the outcome will make your mark and define who you are politically. So do the right thing and make us all proud. Before we close, one more observation, one more question. If we end up with a PPM and independent coalition, should we now see some sort of manifesto come out? It doesn't have to be published in booklet form or whatever, but shouldn't they say what are the major issues that they have agreed that they're going to tackle, the direction that they're going to take this country? They all have manifestos. Do we parse a little bit from each of those to have a government of reconciliation, a government of the people, for the people, and by the people?
You see, on the 10th of December 1831, when the Caymanians took their own independence, that's what they did. After they formed the government at Pedro St. James, they brought all of their people down to Georgetown, where the majority of the people were living, and they explained to the people what they had done. And they displayed the newly elected group of legislators to the people. And then we had the bicameral house. We had an upper house and a lower house. We expect, if they could do that 180 odd years, 86 years ago, we could do that. They should do that now. They should come and tell us, here's the government that we have agreed to, and here is what the ministries are going to be, and that try to get at least our affirmation from us that this is what we want, and this is what we do not want.
And some of the things that they're going to do.
And some of the things that they're going to do. Here is what we are going to do. Here's what our priorities that we are going to start with. Once we're sworn in, here's what the cabinet is going to undertake for the first or second year of our administration. I think the country needs that, and I think that is something that they should do.
Okay, I'm going to take those as your closing comments as well, and ask Ms. Teresa for some.
Yeah, and I'll be pretty brief
as well.
Yeah, because it's very clear to me that promises have a role in our politics. But I think that our politicians owe it to the voters to say what they intend to do, as Dr. Macfield just rightly said. But politics built on big promises of special results, it makes it awkward for a fit in our democracy, because power is so is diffused in a way in which it is now in Cayman. The private sector has a significant role in the way in which our leadership is structured. I think the word that we all must have on our lips is the word called compromise. 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 Nobody's going to get everything that they want. But when we're speaking of that compromise, let us put all of our citizens front and center of the decisions that we make. Caymanians don't want to be external optimists anymore, like they're viewing this thing as if they're watching a movie. They want to play an integral part in all the decisions that are being made. And you hear it. Let us not wait until we get to a place, OC and Dr. Macfield, where blood starts to go on our pavements and on our roads, because leadership plays a deaf ear to what the community wants.
Folks, I want to thank you for allowing Radio Cayman, and by extension for the record, into your homes, into your places of work, into your vehicles as you traverse the busy roads of the Cayman Islands. I also want to thank our panel here this morning, Dr. Steve Macfield and Ms. Teresa Pitcairn. I want to thank all of you who contributed with your questions or your observations as well. I want to remind you that we are our brothers and our sisters' keepers. There is always someone out there who's less fortunate than we are, and I ask you to extend a helping hand to them. If you can't do that, then I suggest you donate to a worthy charity, because we always want to consider those who need, not necessarily those who want. Say to you, have a great day. I would implore our elected members of our Legislative Assembly, those who are seeking to form the government, let's get rid of the uncertainty. Let's get down to our Legislative Assembly, and those of you have heard our panel here say, go out there to your constituencies, consult with them. Do not keep the Cayman Islands in the dark. Do not keep the international community in the dark. Do not keep our investors in the dark. Let's get some certainty. We talk about a stable political system that we have, and the attraction that gives to investors and people who want to come and live and work here in the Cayman Islands. Let's live up to that ideal as well. We have received here, again, some notices, not really notices, but information in relation to the latest configuration of a government, or the latest iteration of it. And we have purposely not reveal that, simply because it is more speculation and conjecture than anything else. We want to hear from the leadership of this country. We want to hear from the government. We want to hear from the potential persons who will form the government. Come out and tell us if you feel that you have something that is ironclad. When I heard about one particular combination on Friday, my question was, is it something that you can take to the bank? Give us something that you can take to the bank. We implore you to do that. We do not need this. I say to you folks, have a great day. Continue to support your radio station, Radio Cayman. Join Sterling, Dwayne Banks at 12 noon for Talk Today. Have a great day. And as usual, we ask the good Lord to bless these three wonderful, beautiful Cayman Islands that we want to remain that way as well.
Informative, impartial, insightful.
This is your talk show.
1-800-534-8255. Your calls, your input. This is For the Record.